Thank you very much, Program Director. The Royal Princess Network as a leadership is concerned predominantly with matters of rural development. Whilst that is the case, and as Mam Dosi has already explained to us the challenges that are faced by the rural communities, there is an unawareness amongst the movement that there are tensions in how we sometimes construct and construe of gender-based violence, femicide, and child abuse. But despite this, it gives us pleasure to know that we are working together to realize the National Strategic Plan for Gender-Based Violence, which was released by the President in 2020. Pillar 1 of the National Strategic Plan for Gender-Based Violence encourages multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder involvement in the coordination of gender-based violence. And it is in this regard that I really thank the South African Royal Princesses Network for coordinating a webinar like this and other activities. I follow their activities also on social media, and I do know that they are playing their part. And thank you so much to all of the members of the network and the coordinators. And this webinar is also a contribution to the realization of Pillar 2 of the National Strategic Plan, which clearly communicates the state's commitment to preventing violence before it happens. One of the ways to prevent gender-based violence and femicide before it happens is to address child abuse, and that is what we are about this afternoon. Child abuse and adversity. A number of scientific studies prove that child abuse and adversity, these experiences actually precede both violence perpetration and victimization. By that we mean that all children who have been exposed early in life to violence and adversity are at risk of becoming perpetrators of violence, but they are also at risk of becoming victims of violence. Children are at risk of violence, and particularly gender-based violence and femicide, even before they are born. I am not going to touch on violence that is experienced by women during pregnancy. That is a conversation for another day. What I would like to highlight this afternoon, because we are talking about child abuse and adversity, is actually the unlawful and intentional killing of a female by a system. Now, I need you to note that this afternoon, I am saying by a system. I'm saying this because the job of killing a female person in this country as elsewhere can be done by the hands of a man, and we call that femicide, when a man kills a woman because she is a woman for a number of reasons. But also, that is not the only way we kill women. Our actions and inactions, especially the actions and inactions of the state, as highlighted as well just now by Mamu Ndamase, are also killing women every day, and we call that structural violence or social injustice. But also as a society, we contribute to this through what I call the devaluing of female offspring in favor of a male offspring. This is very common in patrilineal and patriarchal societies. So patrilineal societies being those where the boy carries the name of the family. So intergenerational carrying of the surname. That's the patrilineal from the father's side. So this is very common because the boy, especially where a boy is born within or by married parents, they are expected to be the heir, and they are afforded the honor because they are a male. Now, you could argue that we actually live in a modern and democratic society. People sometimes throw this statement at us that we are democratic, but we need to understand that democracy does not change our entrenched social values. It does not come close to doing that. In fact, that is not what it was meant. So in this modern society that South Africa is, and with our commitments to gender equality and an ideal destination, we may fall trap into thinking that sex-selective pregnancies are not an issue. And yet, when we plant an idea in the mind of an expectant couple, especially where marriage is at stake, that should they give birth to a boy, bazakube benze kahle, bazawube bazibulile, basiphe indodana, basiphe inkulu. All those expectations that we plant in the minds of an expecting couple actually set in motion a series of expectation. Chief among these expectations is greatness. So there is an expectation of greatness that is set in motion, and this then is accompanied by a system of support around the child so that he is protected, he is safe, he is successful, he is respectable, he is dignified. And when you have not declared greatness on the girl child, what that means is the opposite is actually what we allow to happen to girls and young women. Child abuse is constructed as actions or a failures to act, and this may cause injury, emotional harm, risk serious harm, and even death. So an absence of the expectations of greatness on its own is a foundation for adversity for girls. The society's indifference and lesser enthusiasm in terms of their expectations of a girl suggests that we will not rally behind her for safety, for success, for respect, for dignity, and all the things that we rally behind a boy for. And as a result of this, we also see challenges with children, such as child labor, as already mentioned, and child labor being the exploitation of children through any form of work that deprives the child of their childhood. So child labor is not asking children to do chores in your house, but if children are expected to go and work and they are not able to enjoy their childhood, then that is child labor. It also happens to the extent that it interferes with the ability of the child to attend school. So when we take them to be cattle herders, when we take them as house help in our houses and we know that they are still young and they should be going to school, then there is a problem there. Also, when we do not return girls to school immediately after pregnancy and childbirth, we are actually contributing to child labor because we are sending them to join the world of work very early on in life. And in this world of work, this is where women are underemployed and mainly employed in precarious jobs. We are setting them up for sex work. As minors in the sex work industry, they are at risk of child prostitution, which is defined as an involvement in commercial sexual exploitation. This child prostitution could be in exchange of gifts, food, clothes, drugs, or job opportunities. Now, the challenge with South Africa is that we do not have a law against sexual harassment, or what I call a tit for tat, or what other people call the boardroom sexual liaisons. And these are not criminalized in South Africa, but they are dealt with through employer human resources policy. And not all employers have these policies that will curb sexual harassment, tit for tat, or boardroom liaisons in the workplace. And so many people actually avail themselves for these situations. And we find people who hold power and have access to opportunities that they actually avail these opportunities and positions in return for sexual favors in these companies. And because not all companies have responsibilities for putting in place, the responsibility is there, but they don't actually take that responsibility seriously for putting in place human resources policies to deal with this. These kind of men or perpetrators of tit-for-tat harassment actually overstay in these companies and actually rise to leadership positions. Now, these early experiences for girls and young women undermine bodily integrity. Girls and young women's bodily integrity is deemed unworthy and can be violated at no consequence for the perpetrators. We see this a lot in non-consensual pornography and disproportionate negative consequences that non-consensual pornography has for girls and women. Consent is a very important area of intervention for the Royal Princess Network because violent consumption of women's bodies happens in various ways. Child marriages, as just mentioned, is one of the ways in which women's bodies are actually violated through a guise of an institutionalized tradition or culture. So child marriages and ukutwala are actually the forms of institutionalized access to non-consensual sex. I describe these examples as institutionalized because in South Africa, I know that Nkosi Patekile Olomisa is in this panel and maybe he will touch on the law a bit, but I just want to point this out, that in South Africa, actually, our law considers marriage of a minor, a child who is below the age of 18. So anyone who is 16 can be married, and that is considered legal. That is actually against our own commitments that we have made in terms of being signatories to regional instruments such as the Maputo Protocol, which clearly states that no child under the age of 18 should be married. But in South Africa, a child under the age of 18 can be married legally so. And also things like tradition and culture sometimes permit a man's choice to take a wife under the age of 18, and still this continues despite the presence of traditional structures that should monitor and sanction any practices that compromise women's ability to fully realize their potential. Now, the challenge that we have with eliminating these practices such as ukuthwala is that there is no law in South Africa against ukuthwala. Again, because Nkosi Phathekile Holomisa is also the Deputy Minister for Justice and Constitutional Development, I am expecting that he will remember that we still do not have a law in this country against ukuthwala. So a perpetrator of that particular practice may get away if they did not forcibly handle the girl. Because if they forcibly handle the girl, then we can talk about abduction. And the court has to prove abduction. And they can also get away if they did not move the girl from one place to another. If they moved a girl from one town to another, then we can talk about trafficking, because there is a case against trafficking. But if they take this girl and keep them in the same village and do not handle them violently, then there is no case to prove, because there was no trafficking. Also, if the child is aged 16, even though they are still below the age of 18, then it's very difficult for these alleged perpetrators to be prosecuted, because there is no statutory rape. So actually, as we advocate for ukuthwala to be eliminated, we are advocating based on a series of legal instruments, but there is not one legal instrument in this country that says ukuthwala is against the law and describes what ukuthwala is. So the court will have to prove rape, and we know how disappointing we are as a country in convicting those who are accused of rape. So amongst the many things that the network is doing, I would like to see the Royal Princesses Network join the civil society in advocating for a law against ukuthwala, for the alignment of the marriage age with the Maputo Protocol, but also with our own legal definition of adulthood, which is 18 and above. And also a law against sexual harassment, because there is no law in this country against sexual harassment. We rely on labor policies. So in fact, it is not criminal to actually harass someone in this country. And also to advocate for a legal crime category for femicide, because again, we do not have a legal crime category for femicide. What we have in this country is murder, is homicide, but we do not have the killing of a female because they are a woman. And we know that that happens a lot. Femicide is widely described by researchers in this country, but we still don't have a law that specifically targets femicide. And lastly, I would like to invite the South African Royal Network to actually join hands with the civil society in addressing school dropout at the age of 10, because we need to reduce child labor. And one of the ways in which, at grade 10, one of the ways in which we can reduce child labor is to target young people. And we know that evidence in South Africa suggests that a lot of young people, both girls and boys, actually drop out from grade 10. So we need to make sure that we keep both girls and boys at school for longer, so that we reduce child labor. Thank you very much, Madam Program Director, for the opportunity to share a few words with the panel this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.